I'm going to make a start, and if people join us a little bit later, that's fine, and hopefully lots of people will find us later on the recording as well. So, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko kai Coleman tuku ingoa. I'm going to begin this afternoon with karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa namo te moana, he orahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, araha atu, araha mai, tātou e tātou katoa, huie, tākie. We're going to be peaceful and like the green sea and the green stone. All right. Well, welcome everybody this afternoon to the webinar looking at the draft social sciences curriculum. I am delighted to be joined by my guests. I'm just going to explain quickly how things will run, and then I'll ask them to introduce themselves. So, for those of you who've been to the webinars before, essentially, I'm going to kind of show you the landing page that we have for you. And then we're going to start sort of working our way through the key elements, key issues around the learning area in relation to what the consultation is asking us to review. And my lovely guests and experts will chime in with their thoughts on that. And then in sort of the last 5-10 minutes, depending on how we go for time, I'll just go back to that landing page and show you all the links to get to things and how to engage in the consultation process, how to find things, and hopefully set you up for a successful and smooth consultation. So I will just show that page up. So this here, just to clarify, is, as I said, that landing page, which I'll come back to at the end of the piece, that will provide you with all the connections to the bits that you need for completing the consultation. And we click on this. So I do wish to continue that. Oh, I've got that big now. That's funny. And now we'll just move to the main content. Except that's not in this one. Right, so I won't do that anymore. We will now introduce my delightful guests. So if I can ask each of you to just introduce yourself briefly and give me your kind of high-level thoughts on the social sciences draft. Marta, if we could start with you and then maybe move to you. Thanks.
Kia ora Claire, kia ora koutou, ko Marta toku inoa. My name is Marta Estellés. I am a senior lecturer in social sciences at the University of Waikato. And yeah, very passionate about this learning area. I do quite a bit of research on it, and yeah, I'm a former social studies teacher as well. Thank you for the invitation, Claire.
Doris, do you want to give us your high level first take on this draft?
Yeah, I mean, my first idea about it is mostly how content loaded is overwhelmingly loaded with content. It represents as well a very important shift away from tradition in social sciences of issues-based approach and looking at the social world in an interdisciplinary way, and also a very important move away from biculturalism and the recognition of biculturalism in the country. Those are the main highlights, I'd say.
Thank you.
Yeah. Kia ora koutou, ko Philippa or Pip Hunter ingoa. Thank you, Claire, for the opportunity to talk and listen in this webinar. I do know some of you who have joined the webinar. So well done. It's great to see that you're there. Okay, so my thoughts about this is just such a departure from what we have traditionally and continued to evolve around social sciences curriculum. I teach senior social studies right up to year 13, which I would say follows our University of Waikato definition of the social studies, being multidisciplinary and multisensory. So in teaching senior social sciences, it means I can invite people with anthropology, political studies, sociology, New Zealand studies, specific studies, to do the senior social studies up to year 13. I'm also pretty well versed in social studies developments, probably 30 years of experience. I'm not saying experience is a good thing, but I do have that knowledge of what we have done traditionally and tried also to change over the last 3 iterations of change affecting social sciences. We've got the New Zealand Histories curriculum as embedded in Te Ao Tangata, the refreshed curriculum, and also the Te Mātai Aho. And I always saw the Te Mātai Aho as towards an indigenization of the curriculum. I see this particular curriculum as a total departure from that, almost a recolonization of what has actually not actually really been before. I'm also a history education lecturer, and I have a great knowledge of what changes we've had with NCEA and curriculum and contextual achievement objectives and standards in history. My view is that the draft social sciences I don't know where all this stuff came from, but it is certainly content loaded. I'm not sure it's coherent, as for instance, Graham would like. I've read a lot of Graham's documentation that supported the development of this curriculum. Thank you, Graham, for that. But I don't know where this stuff came from. And it seems to me there's a lot of stuff that is leveled. It's totally inappropriate for young people to be learning about. It's Eurocentric, Western Eurocentric, really. And it's just so dense. Anyway, that's my sorry. I could go on forever, but I won't.
and we'll hear those wonderful thoughts, Pip, as we carry on. Okay, so we're going to now move to kind of look at the sections of the document as you would find them in the draft curriculum. First, starting with the purpose statement. So, commentary, and again, when I created these, and I should of course acknowledge that these resources are based expert perspective and have been gifted. It is not just Claire's brilliant thoughts, and I've just sort of put them together here. So, in terms of that purpose statement, I think the sense is that there's some familiar language that teachers are going to recognise in terms of being part of social sciences, but it's not really carried through necessarily into what the remainder of the draft then delivers. It's, as Pip has already indicated, that shift around from that interdisciplinary issues-based approach. There's a talk about more kind of disciplinary knowledge, but in fact, it just seems to be a lot more kind of content that is not coherent necessarily, or tethered by a real understanding of why that's the content that's there. There's a concern about the continued use of the whakatauki, and its position within there. And then, as you've alluded to already, the kind of loss of a real sense that this is a curriculum for Aotearoa, for our context, and for our learners. Marta, do you want to throw any more thoughts in around the purpose statement?
Yeah, I think, firstly said that there are some nice ideas in there. Like, we can see some reference to understanding the social world, to things like, young people being able to participate in society. The main problem is that, you don't see those being followed up or being coherent with the rest of the curriculum. If we have knowledge so fragmented into different disciplines, it is very difficult that, we can make connections and that, we can have a more comprehensive understanding of the social world and also connect it to students' lives, because that's one of the things with that disciplinary approach is like it kind of follows the grammars of the disciplines without really connecting this to issues, social issues that are going to be connected to a student's lives. And then also, there is a recognition in the purpose statement of like having multiple perspectives and exploring the social work from multiple perspectives. But in reality, that's not what we see in the overall document. We can see a very clear attempt of controlling the narrative of the New Zealand society and overall society, and with very specific examples of what teachers need to be saying and teaching. And one of the richness actually about social sciences is that we can explore issues from different perspectives and things like that. So yeah, it's one of the incongruences of this curriculum. And also, yeah, I mean, some of the things that are mentioned in there, how tokenistic it is to continue with that whakatauki that talks about he tangata, he tangata, he tangata, when Maori is not even recognized as tangata whenua, they are recognized as another diverse community in that purpose statement. So yeah, and even that connection with the people, we don't see the people, we see facts and events, but not things that are relevant for people, right? So yeah, that disconnection from experience, from yeah, bicultural frameworks overall. There are lots of more things to talk about, but I know this is very short. So
yeah, thank you, Marta. If we then move to looking at the structure of the learning area, as we've already discussed, the idea that there's a lot of volume of content and how that's going to impact on in terms of the depth that learners will be able to engage with that material. As you indicated, Marta, that return to kind of these traditional grammars in terms of the disciplinary boundaries. And then I did wonder, Philip, if you don't mind, to talking about, the loss of that cultural identity strand and the sort of inquiry methodology and what the impact of that is in terms of social sciences.
Would you like me to do that now? Or?
Yes, go for it.
Okay. Hey, Marta, I'm just going to follow on from your comments. I totally support what you're saying. There is a quote in the purpose statement about that this draft is the phases are all about the foundational knowledge about the world, end quote. And also the comment about disciplinary tools and conventions. We have to remember that any subject is totally socially constructed. And, I'm really kind of concerned about the disciplines that have actually been identified. So we've lost our breadth of conceptual kind of thinking, the ideas or where students can reach tentative generalizations. We've moved into a kind of transmissive approach. And of course, it's all about the alignment with knowledge-rich curriculum and science of learning. And of course, those two things are all very worthy, but they don't connect very well with social sciences in terms of its application and also its thinking. So I just want to point out that in terms of the disciplines, I think the geography and the history are really traditional. I'm very concerned about the sort of extended universe kind of model that starts off with really prehistory and goes right up to, Second World War or later. I'm really concerned about the social construction of a chronology, that this is the learning that students are entitled to be taught. I've seen that phrase in people's writing. Marta, do you want to pop in there or?
yeah, sure. I think overall it's just very clear that this curriculum was supposed to be a knowledge-rich curriculum, but we haven't actually, or we haven't unpacked what knowledge is and what richness means. And I think very clearly this curriculum points at at knowledge that is a very elitist knowledge and very Western as well, and also that I don't get a sense of richness in any sense. I would like to see which are the concepts, which are the main big ideas that we want them to engage with, that we want the students to engage with. No, what I see is just a list of facts, a list of events that students need to learn and that follow that really backward approach to history and geography in particular, but like studying the Stone Age through to the Second World War with a very Eurocentric or Western approach, right?
Mm. Mm. I was thinking that in phase 1, year 1, it probably has the most kind of positive take around looking at the past. Remember that the past is about lived human experience. History is just a socially constructed subject, whatever it might look like. But in the phase 1, we've got things like storying. We've got things like understanding what the past is, something about identity. All of those things should be right through every phase, not just left kind of at phase 1 when the kids are about 5 years old. And I think that's a really, really sad thing. Geography is the same. Phase 1 geography looks as if it could go right through the phases of geography because it interacts nicely with continuity and change or historical kind of concepts.
Okay, I'm going to push through just because I'm looking at time. And I think you've kind of come to around there, Philippa, too, talking about some of the pedagogical, I guess, shifts in what's in this draft and giving that phase 1 example, I think really helpful in terms of thinking about the ways that we engage with social sciences at the conceptual development that you're looking to engender. If we look at the introduction to the statement, then we'll get to those phases specifically. Again, there's a comment around the disconnect around what the introduction talks about in terms of active and engaged learning, and then what appears to be a lot of kind of passive sort of fact learning. The sequencing that you've discussed around chronology or geographical sequencing maybe not being the best way of sequencing for learning. And then the sort of absence of why of the learners in the curriculum and why this content should be relevant and resonant for them. So I'm just going to move forward though, just for time. You talked there a little bit about the phase 1 content and how appropriate or inappropriate that is for the developmental age of those early phase learners. Marta, feel free to chime in on that one. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Before we do that,
Sure.
I'm just thinking this is such a change, as Marta's also talked about this, the fact that we've lost our kind of inquiry focus.
Yes.
Is really, really, really important. The inquiry focus enables students to look beyond factual knowledge. It's about values, perspectives, reflection, evaluation, critical affiliation, all of those things that we do, the practical, the enacted, the active work with students. Under the draft, the word practices has actually replaced the notion of skills. In social sciences, social studies, we've used skills processes, large processes of activity and action that have a whole lot of differing skills within them. Now, that is really important for us. But with the practices, having looked through a lot of those statements, they're actually knowledge statements. They're not actually skills related or doing. A lot of them, because we now have practices in there and we've got a set body of so-called knowledge-rich stuff, the practices are to considering or asking questions. They are not application rich at all. And I think they're very, very, very shallow. And, I mean, I've always thought social studies, for instance, was active, engaging, and really interesting, not just a boring set of facts. So the practices are problematic. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Pip, and I reiterate something that I mentioned before, and they almost look like those practices almost look like a way of controlling the narrative of providing an image of current New Zealand society as like very romanticized. There is no conflict in here. There are no problems going on, and that is just the opposite of what I would like from social studies, right? Which is helping people understand that conflict and give them tools as well to navigate it, or to participate in that conflict.
And so if we look at the phase teaching sequence here up on the screen, just one of the things that stands out to me in terms of what you've already talked about is, I guess, the way in which the history presented is kind of, as you said, romanticized, or that it's, they've taken out, in taking out, I guess, those practical applications of looking at different viewpoints and being able to develop your critical capacity, and then having very sort of static blocks of facts. How does that, how will that impact on learners thinking about, what formed New Zealand, or thinking about moving forward and how you can apply your learnings from social sciences into the world? Marta.
That's a great question, Claire. I also think that the very traditional disciplinary take that is suggested here. Somebody said to me that it looks as if it comes from AI. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. But anyway, I'm just thinking about, like, the history that is presented is very political. It's very Eurocentric in its what it's wanting to do. Sure, it will fit okay with civics and society, but I'm really, really saddened that we've lost the culture, well, social, what is it? Culture, society, and identity, or whatever, social organization sort of strand there. To me, the culture strand was a way to integrate the other strands originally. And now we don't really have a culture strand. And so culture is kind of given in a weird, superficial way through the suggested context. So I'm wondering, where is actually the Pacific kind of opportunity or space for learning? Where is the Māori space for looking at actually Māori culture and society? Being framed within Te Matai Aho, I think, is very, very insulting, because the social sciences learning area is framed within Te Matai Aho, but it's a total disconnect from what the original Te Matai Aho, in terms of the interweaving, wanted to do. And I'm just amazed that we have still got Te Matai Aho as the shell. And yet it is just really dishonourable, I think, to have that. So just going back, culture and society, so important to the social sciences that are socially constructed,
Mm.
They work with often social reconstructionist discourse, where we all want to have the world as a better place.
Mhm.
The reconstruction, the work, looking at the issues. There is really no opportunity to look at contemporary issues or even issues in the past, where teachers might want to break away from a continuity of Western experience and to form their own context for learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, thank you, Viv, I totally agree. I would also add how, it really presents a vision of history, or, one of the hidden lessons, if you want, from this curriculum is in terms of global history, which I very much appreciate. I very much appreciate that they have included more global content. I believe that's one of the problem is that most of that global content is again from a very Western Eurocentric perspective, and it has been presented in a way that is very teleological. So, it gives the impression that now we are at the very top of, we are the best society that we can ever be. And, the Western civilization has been progressed through all these stages, and now we are at the top democracy sort of moment. And that's a very, very dangerous view of the world, right? And from questions around capitalism, colonization, and things like that. And in terms of the country, I think from Aotearoa, New Zealand, I think it's also very dangerous that presentation of the country, of the history of the country as a history of migration. Different waves of migrants arriving into the country, because that really obscures the process of colonization, which it's been crucial in the country, whether we like it or not, and any form of silence that history is completely, inaccurate. Of course, colonization doesn't explain it all, but but it's such an important part of the picture that is very ideologically driven, that they have removed this part from it.
Thank you, Marta. I totally agree. I think I don't know, but there are some people, I don't know who has written this, but obviously there are some people who like all classics. Now, if you were an 8-year-old learner, and the word learner I don't think is used in this particular draft, if you're an 8-year-old learner, you're looking at phase 2. And ancient Greece is the major kind of large context here. Government and city-states, hoplites, and the Peloponnesian War, which happened, I had to look it up, 431 BC. It lasted 31 years. Hoplites were infantry people who participated in the war between Athens and Sparta. The kids were, it suggested, look at philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the Persian Wars, and the impact of ancient Greece's past to ideas about New Zealand's democracy. That's in the civic strand. If you were 9 years old in year 5, you would be looking at Chinese imperialism or empire and cultures around that. If you are age 10 in year 6, you would be looking at Elizabethan history and or Victorian history, and you'd also be looking at plate movements and earthquakes and regional comparisons in Southeast Asia. Now, we have not done this work. Where is this going to come from? Who is resourcing this? And if it's embedded or implemented, science of learning is all very well around repetition, motivation, measurement, and so forth. It's an efficiency discourse. Okay, that's all very well, but kids are not like this. they are unique and they're diverse. And, the problem will be in the implementation.
Yeah, and in relation to that implementation, it's like the time constraints because I just made a very brief calculation, and if we use as an example year 8 students, they will have 40 hours per year for social sciences, and they have around 7 big topics to learn about, which in history between civics, history, geography, and economic activity. And, if we distribute relatively consistently each of these topics, they will only have 5 hours of teaching it. So imagine, teaching about European imperial expansion, including pre 800,000, 1800 context, causes of expansion, the British case study, commercial interest, the use of diplomacy and conflict, forms of imperial rule in just 5 hours. It's completely unrealistic.
Impossible.
In any reasonable depth, again. So
yeah, a lot of the supposedly knowledge-rich stuff that students are entitled to be taught has come from the senior history curriculum from particularly year 11. And even that has moved away now in terms of history in our schooling curriculum. So schooling history is very particular and different to whatever history might be constructed and available to look at.
Okay. Well, on the topic of time and quantity, we are already out of it. And I don't want to stop you because but we have definitely covered a lot of the things that are here in this resource, just kind of in a different way, but that's fine. What I thought I would do before I hop out of this and just share with all of you in the webinar where you can find all these bits of resources and how to go through the process for consultation is if I can just maybe just ask Marta and Pep just to give us that kind of like final high level thing that you would want teachers to think about when they are hopefully contributing to the consultation on this. Marta, let's start with you.
Great. So, thank you, Claire Namihinwe, for the opportunity to be here. Basically, I would just recommend teachers to really think about the possibility of bringing this into the classroom, which as I said, I think is completely unrealistic, and also how much control is out there on the narrative that we want to provide on New Zealand society, highly romanticized and completely disconnected from students' lives and experiences. And again, a very clear move to provide a very colonial sort of view of the history of Aotearoa New Zealand, and a very Western centric view of global history as well. Those would be my highlights, basically, and how conflict, social action, and issues-based approach, any form of social studies, skills processes have been completely removed from the curriculum. There is no engagement with, analysis of different sources, of different perspectives, analyzing decision making and social action. There is nothing of that. So, it's a big shift from what we have had. I'm not saying that what we had was perfect, but this is going into a direction that is very dangerous from my perspective.
Thank you, Marta.
Yeah. When I read through this draft, honestly, I threw pens at the wall. I was just, I just could not believe it. And, somebody said, well, you just need to take a stiff drink after this and just get over it. But I don't know if I can. I'm thinking about, for instance, year 9 and 10 students. For the 13 and 14 years old, they're basically going to be looking at conflict. World War I in one year and World War II in the other. Weimar Republic, you name it. Things that are really, we've been able to take small contextual little themes or whatever we want to do and use those really effectively through social inquiry. We cannot just have kids sitting on their bottoms, kind of, I don't know, as empty vessels. But this has happened because of the science of learning alignment with knowledge-rich curriculum. I don't think there's enough research. We know the positives and negatives of science of learning, but not for social sciences. We've got a completely different learning area here. Plus, we have great teachers. What's going to happen, for instance, in initial teacher education? Do people think that we have not been working with social sciences well enough? What is the evidence of this? So, in my role, I would not be able to teach this stuff. I just couldn't really do it, and nor would I want to.
Okay, well, that's probably a good point to end that, and just, again, as you said, have teachers to think about. No, but have teachers think about, as you say, is this the content that they think they can teach, or would they want to teach it? And that might be a useful thing to think about in their own consultation period. So I'm just going to go back now to share the no, that's not what I'm doing. To share the main page for everyone, just to show you where those links are. So for those of you who are hopefully now thinking, oh yes, I might want to have a look at this, or I might do a bit more deep digging, and that Pip and Marta have piqued your interest to follow up with a consultation, a submission, this button here on this link, I'll put this link into the chat in a moment, will take you to that snapshot document we were just looking at. And then if you click on here, this will take you to the learning area itself. What I would recommend here is if you go down, click on here and go down to the file downloads themselves. I would recommend that you go up here. It's at the top. They're in different places on different documents, and download the whole draft. So even if you are teaching at 1 year level or just 2 year levels, go and have a look at the material across, because I think that coherence is really interesting, or the lack of coherence potentially in places is really interesting, and just to be mindful of where learners can be coming from and going to. And then I'll get to my main doc here. This link here takes you to the survey document. It's a very straightforward Survey Monkey style document. Asked you for a bit of basic kind of identifying information, and then and it moves through the sections that I've laid out on that snapshot summary. So you can have that next to, if you want, to give you something to think through. It does also ask you to think about resourcing that you might require. And I think both Pip and Marta have highlighted kind of the amount of resourcing that might be required to enact this document. And I would suggest that you keep a copy of your own submission as well, just to make sure that you've got it for reference, perhaps when the final version comes out, to see how perhaps your thoughts were responded to, or how they stack up in the end. The other thing on this document, I guess, that just sort of takes you through the bits that you're going to look at in the consultation. And there are a couple of extra articles down here on some critique and some challenge around the document that you might wish to consider. So I will go back in here and see if I can see you all. Here we go. I'm just going to put that link into the chat there. All of this will go up on the AEC site in about an hour's time, and it will go up on my main draft curriculum consultation guide as well. So you can look at all of the learning areas if you've not got to those as well, and you want to go back and watch those webinars. So I just do final karakia. Thanks again to Pip and to Marta for coming in. Some lovely comments there you might want to see. Kia tātou rangimerie, ki runga i ngā iwi o te ao. Let your peace reign on all the people of the world, and hopefully you go peacefully now into the rest of the Thursday evening. Ka kite, everybody.
Thank you, Claire.
Nā mihi noa.
Thank you.
Bye bye.